Welcome to the Pillar Podcast, where we put racial equity front and center. Join us as we explore equity. We'll take a look at overcoming opportunity gaps and strategies that ensure equitable learning experiences for all students in JCPS.
Welcome to another episode of the Pillar Podcast. I am Ian Brandon, your host today, Satellite Office Supervisor for JCPS, and today I have the Deanna Southerling with us.
Hello, Ian. It's good to see you.
It is good to see you as well. Thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely.
Today, we will be diving into, obviously, the marketing and communications and what you do. But before we jump in, I'd like to know your journey, right,
Sure.
in becoming the marketing supervisor, for JCPS.
Oh, absolutely. So I'm a JCPS graduate. I went to JCPS elementary, middle, and high schools. And then when I graduated, I went to Syracuse University, where I studied public relations and political science. And believe it or not, I was right about what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. So I'm really thankful for my education there and my education here at JCPS. After graduating there, I moved to New York City and I worked at a giant PR agency where Dove, the personal care brand, was my only client. And I learned a tremendous amount about public relations, stakeholder engagement, influencers, media relations. It was a huge growth place for me, not to mention getting to work on one of my favorite brands right away. So it was an amazing, amazing journey there. But eventually I was ready to move back here to Louisville, and I started looking around for another place that I could use those public relations skills that I had developed even more in my time in New York. And I actually ended up working in arena marketing at the KFC Yum Center. So I promoted all of the concerts and family shows that come to the arena, and it was very fun. And there I learned a whole lot about advertising, which is a skill that I hadn't developed so much in my previous job. So I'm very thankful for that and the relationships I built here locally. Eventually, though, it was time to grow some more, and I was looking around for another place that would allow me to use those skills and be a job that I would love, knowing that I'm doing some good in the community and making a difference. And an opportunity opened up here at JCPS on the marketing side of things, and it sounded incredibly interesting, and it really has been. I've been here at JCPS for 3 years now and still loving it.
Congratulations. So, yeah, we don't have the exact same path to get into JCPS, but similar background in education and experience. So I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do with my degree. My master's is in communication, I have background in marketing, and I too worked in the arena space. So I worked for a large, I would say, marketing firm, if you will. So I did a lot in sports marketing. So I'm familiar with a lot of the advertising components that you mentioned, like for working in the Yum.
Absolutely.
So that's awesome.
That's wonderful.
One thing I didn't know before coming to JCPS was that JCPS has a marketing supervisor, right? So a lot of people don't really know that. So what is it exactly a marketing supervisor does, and how does that differ from others in the communication department?
Sure, that is very valid. I think there are a lot of people who don't necessarily know that we have anyone working on the marketing side of things for JCPS, and I think that's because it's still relatively new for the district. I had one predecessor who was here for about a year or so before I was, and they were the first district marketer that we had. But my job is really cool. So I get to talk about all of the amazing things that are going on in JCPS. My job is really to nurture and to develop our brand, to remind the community that JCPS is an amazing school district, and it's a place that they can trust and be confident that their student is going to learn, is going to grow, is going to be cared for, and then is going to graduate prepared for their future. So it's really very exciting.
It sounds very interesting, unique. I would imagine no day is really the same. So do you find yourself using a lot of the experience in working with the Dove brand, right, as far as managing a brand? Do you find yourself pulling on a lot of that experience for JCPS?
I do definitely pull on a lot of my previous experiences at both previous jobs, and I'm really thankful for that. So on the Dove side of things, there was a lot more media relations, which actually ties into the second part of your question is, what is the difference between what I do on the marketing side of the communications department and what the rest of the team does on the other side of the communications department? And I would say on my side of things, my job involves a lot of advertising, strategy, oversight of brand development and visual identity, digital advertising, whereas on the communication side of things, their side involves a lot more daily media relations, the daily newsletters you get, as well as incident management and communication, and then every day the posts you see on JCPS social media channels are there, as well as video and web stories. So they do a lot more of what you see on a daily basis, and I do a little bit more on the special event side of things, the new initiative side of things, working with our HR department on recruitment efforts, and I do a great deal with our Office of School Choice around the student assignment and school choice options that our families have.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because that was one of our first, I would say, major events. We got to work together with the student assignment event earlier this year. So that was fun and exciting.
It was truly exciting. It was something new for us on the communication side of things. So we're no strangers to doing community events throughout the city, throughout the year, but this was a great opportunity for us to have our school choice staff in one location down at the satellite office at Shawnee, where families could come and spend as much time as they wanted talking to our school choice staff about their options, about the process, what they need to do to get where they want to go. And it was just a really, really cool event, and the space at the satellite office was amazing and really lent itself to that.
Yeah, we appreciated having you guys down there. It was really fun.
That's awesome.
And so you mentioned working with a variety of departments and kind of bigger picture and strategy. So what are some of the challenges you face in working with such a large district and a variety of departments?
Oh, wow. Yes, our district is large. Obviously, we're serving nearly 100,000 kids, and we are honestly serving kids in so many different ways. Obviously, from the time we pick them up on the bus to the food we feed them, everything that we're teaching them, to getting them back home, extracurricular activities, all of that, plus their social emotional needs, their material needs. Our district has a ton of departments to meet the needs of students, which is truly incredible. But it definitely means that there's a lot of different departments. And as more and more people learn about marketing and the options that are there, there can be a lot of projects that are happening at the same time. And it's not always the case that different departments know that I'm working on a project with someone else. And from my previous time working with one client, but different parts of their brand, you never want to communicate to one brand that they are perhaps less of a priority than another. So a challenge can be making sure that everyone feels prioritized and that the work for every department advances on the timeline that's needed, knowing that there are many things happening at once. And they're all important.
And they're all important. And I think we're going to touch a little bit later on kind of strategy and what gets coverage, but I think a big part of that is relationships, right? Developing relationships, prioritizing, and just having a big aerial 360 view of what's going on. Right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And so, as you know, on this podcast, we talk a lot about diversity. We talk a lot about inclusion, specifically, well, really for everyone, but specifically for our Black and brown and underserved communities.
Yes, absolutely.
What are some of the ways the communication department seeks to advance racial equity in JCPS?
Yes, so that's incredibly important, right? Racial equity is one of our district pillars, which means that everyone in this district has to be committed to racial equity and should on a daily basis be considering how can I advance the work of racial equity. So one of our goals in the communication side from the racial equity plan is to develop a Change the Narrative campaign. So as many know, there is a prevailing narrative in the community, but really the larger nation around what Black and brown students are like, what they can accomplish, what drives them. And we want to make sure that we are advancing the narrative that is true about JCPS students, that our students, Black and brown students, all of our students are high achievers with big dreams who are doing amazing things in the community. So how we seek to make sure that's seen on the communication side, a big part of it is representation. We all know how important representation is. It's important that students see themselves in positions of success and authority. So we make sure that in our print assets, if we're creating a book or a presentation, that we are showing the full range of our students. We want to make sure that Black students are represented, brown students are represented, all of our students are represented in positive ways in that print communication, also in our web stories and as well in our video communication. So that's one side on that goal of things, but also you have to be really, we have to be very specific and intentional on the school choice side of things. We are honest as a district that we want to make sure that all of our students in various zip codes have an opportunity to engage in the school choice process. And here in JCPS, there are some intricacies there to knowing how to get to the school that you want to get to. And we want to make sure that those intricacies are not a barrier and that we take that communication directly to students and families where they are, so that they have those same opportunities and that we're advancing equity in that way.
That's big. I'm a firm believer in like you really have to see it, right? As a child, as a student, it's hard to envision yourself in a particular role or a certain career if you've never seen someone like you in that space. So being intentional about that, I think is very important. I myself am appreciative of that work.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Yes, you will see that play out in some of our I Am JCPS stories where we're showcasing our team members across all departments who are doing truly awesome things. You'll see that at some of our events. If there's an opportunity for there to be speakers at a podium, we want to make sure that those speakers are from diverse backgrounds. And we're really proud of that so that, again, if you are a student who's looking toward your future, that you can envision yourself behind that podium sharing about something that is important to you.
And we've touched a little bit on the strategy, right? And so covering such a wide range of topics for the district, do you find that some communication strategies work better than others? And what strategies do you feel or have found to work best?
That's really interesting. It does vary a little bit based on the initiative. Overall, on the whole, we definitely do find that direct mail is it's very advantageous for us as a district. Our families love to receive a postcard or a mailing, and they really notice it and take action. That's a challenge for us as a district. So with 100,000 students, direct mail can be expensive. And producing it, mailing it, all of that adds cost, but we do really see that it's truly effective for us. So we want to make sure that we employ that whenever we can. But also another much lower cost tool that we use is digital advertising. Even traditional advertising can be more cost effective there. And we absolutely do have folks coming to us saying, I saw that ad on Facebook, or I saw your commercial on this local news station. So we know that that's effective as well. So it just kind of depends on the initiative.
And that's interesting because I would think that in today's age, the direct mail piece would be something that's not even considered, right? But when you think about the relationship building and engaging people, we all like to receive things, right?
Absolutely.
And so it's just that personal touch where you don't necessarily get with the digital component. So
Yes.
when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense.
Yes. Another thing, though, to that point to consider that I think about in my job is who is the target audience here and what are they like? What media do they engage with? So as we know, we have a range of home life situations for our families. Some are being raised in two-parent households, some with single-parent homes, and then also some are being raised by grandparents, aunts, uncles, folks who might be older. So one tool that isn't always the most effective for us is newspaper advertising. And yet, if we know that we are trying to reach that older demographic, the newspaper advertising can be more effective than something on a Twitter or an Instagram, for example, for them. So we just kind of have to decide and decipher who's our target audience and where can we meet them there.
Yeah, and it's again, that goes back to that strategy, right? And kind of knowing your audience, knowing how they best receive and digest information.
Yes, absolutely.
And kind of piggybacking on working with various groups, right? Given mass media, I would imagine you work or need to work with outside entities as well. Tell us a little bit about the importance of your department in working with some outside agencies.
Oh, absolutely. So our department is technically called Communications and Community Relations. So we have a number of partner organizations that we work with around the city, as do so many other departments in the district. And we're really thankful for those relationships that we have with community partners. They can really help us to get the word out to their constituencies, to their members, to their subscribers in some cases. And that way we're kind of extending the reach of our communications by working with those partner organizations. And frankly, another large group of partner organizations, if you want to think of them that way, can be our local media outlets. So we know that various television, radio, online publications are sources of information for our families. So we know that they could be going to one particular TV station that they work with all the time, that they watch every day, sometimes multiple times a day. And it's important to us to maintain relationships with those news organizations because just like we're a trusted partner that families go to, some of those publications are also very trusted partners that we can reach our families with.
And that makes sense because we all have that certain outlet, right, that we trust or just familiar with, right, whether it be an agency or a social network. Right. We all kind of tap into our own source of information.
Yes.
Speaking of, so the mass media, right, it's it can be very harsh sometimes, even critical. And so how do you navigate dealing with bad media or bad press?
So I think one way that our team on the communications side does do that is to remember that the media are our long-term partners. They're going to be here, and frankly, so are we. JCPS endures. So how do we deal with that negative media, that harsh criticism that, could be based on something that happened in our district that was unfortunate, or it could be based on an unpopular decision that was made. It could really be based on a lot of things. And what I would say that we do on the communication side of things is keep going. Endure, persevere, keep telling the community about how great we are as a district. Continue telling our story, showcasing our amazing kids, the amazing adults we have in our school, in our district. So we deal with that by continuing to hammer down the positive and maybe a lot of times, sometimes what sticks in people's mind can be the negative. There have been studies that show that, but what we do is try to outweigh that with 10 times more positive news from our district.
Which makes sense, because that goes back into the whole strategy and the plan, right? Exactly. The communications plan to push things forward, right? There's, as you know, there's certain cycles in media, right? So you want to persevere through those. Keep sharing that information, highlighting the positive, which also helps to shape certain narratives.
Exactly,
right?
Absolutely. Yes, highlighting the positive, and then again, like we were talking about with our Change the Narrative campaign, if there's a negative narrative out there about sometimes an incident that may have happened at a particular school or involving a certain group of our students, one thing that we'll do on the strategy side of things is just to make sure that we go back to that school and show the community that there's more to the story here. There are amazing things happening at our school. And so we're always showcasing all of the schools in JCPS, because truly there are amazing students, amazing teachers, huge learning, innovation that's happening everywhere across our district.
And so we know, again, such a large district, lots of schools, lots of stories, lots of things happening. How do you and your department decide what stories get coverage, right? I think that would be something you're juggling on a daily basis, right?
Yes, it definitely is. So with all of this incredible news, amazing things happening across our district, there can be a deluge of potential stories to tell. And when we're looking at pitching a story to an external organization, we keep in mind the newsworthy factors, the things that those publications are going to be interested in. And a lot of times the things that they're interested in are going to be things that are the newest, the first, the biggest, affecting the largest number of people, something surprising, if it involves a notable person in the community or nationally. Some of that can be what plays into that story. Other times it's just an incredible story that we know that the community will want to hear. So when we're looking at those external news sources, we kind of consider those priorities, but we also have an amazing JCPS video team here, and we have members of our communication team who write web stories. And when we think about what stories we're going to cover using our own channels, we think about not only those factors, but also what's going to help us tell our district story. How can we showcase our amazing students, what we're about, advance our brand by using our own media? And when we do that, sometimes the external media want to do that story as well.
It makes perfect sense.
Absolutely.
So one thing I always like to ask when I'm hosting is the personal side, right? So I want to switch gears a little bit. And we talked previously about a younger student or a younger you seeing yourself in a particular position or career path. So share with us, whether it be an educator or a particular individual that helped shape you into doing the work that you're currently doing.
Oh, that's a really good question. It took me a while to find that person. So I just want to encourage folks who are watching, if you don't feel like you have that role model, that leader, that mentor to look up to that is really like, oh, I could see myself in that way, or I really appreciate how they conduct themselves in this setting. Keep looking. Keep your eyes open. You never know when you're going to meet them. But interestingly, when I was a high school student here in JCPS, I actually thought that I wanted to be a psychiatrist for most of the time. And then I decided, I'm not sure I want to go to medical school and continue on with all of that education, so to speak. So I considered some other paths, and what kept coming up as an interest for me was communications and marketing, public relations, which is how I found my way to Syracuse there. And it was truly after I graduated, when I was working with Dove, that David Perez, he was my my manager there, and he was someone that I just appreciated his drive. I appreciated how creative he was. I appreciated his hard-working work ethic, and just how he always wanted to ask the question, what can we do better? And why not? And it was just, it really made a difference for me, and I'm thankful that he is still in my life.
That rings so true to me. And I spoke previously on an episode about a former JCPS employee, Mr. White, was that person for me, but the person that really pushed me forward in marketing and communication was a gentleman by the name of Eric Logan. And he runs an organization called Light Up Chance. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my marketing degree at Western Kentucky University. And he had just come out of the communication department, getting his master's in corporate communication.
Gotcha.
And he inspired me to push on, right? This would be a good field. It matches well with marketing. You have an endless breadth of opportunity.
Truly.
And he was one of the ones that really pushed me to look at communications. And before I got in, I didn't understand or know that there was so many opportunities you could do and craft out of that field.
Oh, yes.
To that point, yeah, if you don't have it now, just keep working, keep networking, and you're definitely gonna find that person.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So again, we've talked about narrative, we've talked about strategy and implementing plans, having a vision. So whether it be intentional or unintentional, right, there's been a perceived narrative around underserved communities. How can we change that perceived narrative with our underserved populations?
I think there are a lot of ways that we can do this, and it does tie a little bit back to that representation and getting our stories out to the community, showcasing our students, showcasing our employees who are working in these ways. But another thing that I think really plays into this is intentional language use. So for us as communicators, obviously language are our currency. That's how we are understood and get our stories and our messages across. And we try to be extremely careful about the words that we use. So for example, one thing that we recently decided to consider is whenever possible, using Black instead of African American. We use both still, but what we have seen is that there can be, the narrative can be that Black is not necessarily good or best. And I think that even can come into play when you're just talking about colors on the rainbow. And so we have tried to use the word Black to describe our students. We know that many students identify as Black. They don't use the word African American. I personally can go either way on that, but what we want to do is elevate Blackness. We want Blackness to be seen as good and excellent, and we are really working to incorporate that more and more into our communication. We also are trying to be more intentional about using terms like opportunity gap versus achievement gap, since it kind of can already bring to mind, who's on either side of the gap. And so we try to be more intentional there.
Because words matter.
Words matter.
Words
Absolutely.
Matter. It can be so small, but so impactful. And that's one thing as communicators we understand, right?
Absolutely.
Choice of words matter.
Absolutely.
And so for those in the community, how can they get more involved and more engaged in JCPS's racial equity initiatives?
There are a lot of ways, I would say. Opportunities present themselves throughout the year to give feedback on district initiatives, changes that we're looking at making. I know there are going to be some opportunities for public forums and surveys and info info sessions around the changes to the student assignment plan that are going to be coming up. Same thing for changes to school start times. And I absolutely want to encourage the community to be involved in that. Continue looking out for those opportunities and do your best to take the time to participate, to attend those events, to fill out the survey, to reach out to us in the district, send us an email to let us know how you feel, what is important to you. As we look at opportunities to change the narrative, think about how you can be involved in that. Can you share a story? Can you tell us something awesome that's going on in your community that involves JCPS students? Is there something that you're doing that we could highlight as you're a JCPS grad and we want the world to know that you're doing this amazing thing in the community or even the world? So think about how you can be involved with what's happening here.
Yeah, because I know from my perspective, right, we are always trying to engage families. We're always trying to engage communities, and that feedback is critical, right? It's how we decide, right, on those initiatives and those plans of communication and what we're going to focus on. So it's important to hear from the community in that regard, because we're not touching on what they or the community wants to hear, right? So that feedback is crucial.
Absolutely. Just to guide our district, I want to remind everyone that Jefferson County Public Schools is your public schools. Here in Jefferson County, you are a stakeholder. You are important to us. We want to hear what you have to say about these upcoming plans. So absolutely, do your best to be involved. We'd love to hear from you.
How can the community stay involved, receive more information, and know what's happening not only in JCPS, but also within DEP?
Yes, so that's really important. If you're going to be involved, you have to know about the opportunities to get involved. So JCPS has a lot of social media channels, and certainly I want to encourage our families to be following those, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I know our friends in DEP have an amazing Instagram channel. There's the Envision Equity magazine that you can be reading. If social media isn't necessarily your thing, we have daily newsletters that go out to our families and our employees. We do utilize text messages every now and then. We promote events that we're having, including community forums where you can give feedback, you can come to. But I would say if you can stay tuned to those newsletters, to the magazines, to our social media, you're going to see us promoting those opportunities, and they're just really great ways to stay informed.
Well, Deanna, thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate the conversation. And do you have any final words before we wrap up today?
You know, I don't think I do, but thank you so much for having me on today, Ian. It's been wonderful to talk about this great work that we're all doing in JCPS.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you guys next time.